Good morning. I am just going to give this a moment or two to make sure that we've got everyone joining correctly from the waiting room, and indeed that I have pressed all of the right buttons. Right, that's great. I can see we've got people joining. That's brilliant. So welcome to this morning's webinar from EcoProd. This morning, we're talking about advanced leak detection with Quensus intelligent water management systems. Most of the presentation indeed is from our colleagues over at Quensus. Before we sort of start into the meat of the presentation, if you like, I've got a few housekeeping points for you. You will notice as you join that the session is being recorded. We will process the video and get it kind of uploaded to our website, and at some point tomorrow, no, probably not Saturday, probably on Monday, some point on Monday, you will get a link that gives you the opportunity to watch the full video back, download the slides, so all of the materials and things like that that we're using today will be available to you. You can share that with colleagues and so on as well. Your lines are all muted automatically as you join, so we can't hear you, so you can't ask a question verbally, but there is a little Zoom Q&A function. So if you wiggle your mouse in the bottom of the Zoom window, you get a chat and a Q&A button. If you pop questions in that Q&A, as they occur to you, we'll answer what we can in the background as we're going along, but all the presenters will stay on the line at the end of the kind of core presentation. I'll read those questions out and we'll get them covered for you, one way or another. So our agenda, you will have seen the agenda when you got your invitation and your confirmation, but just kind of to whip through this, we've got a few introductions, and then I'm going to hand over to Dan from Quensus, and he's going to talk through why these kind of technologies are important, how it works, what the installation process looks like, the impact results, and a few sort of case studies. And then, as I said, we will open it up to questions. So you've got three of us on the call today. I'm Rachel. I'm mostly in the background doing the hosting thing, making sure people are logged in correctly, covering the questions and so on. You'll see I've got two colleagues with me, Dan and Jacob. Dan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Dan Simmons. I am the founder and managing director of Quensus.
Jacob?
Hi, I'm Jacob Tompkins. I've been in the water industry for about 35 years, wear lots and lots of different hats. I'm Chief Technology Officer at one of the small water companies. In this circumstance, I am working as water strategy consultant at EcoProd, mainly looking at things like water management plans, all that sort of stuff. So, yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Jacob, do you want to do a little introduction on EcoProd for us?
Yeah, so EcoProd is, well, it stands for environmental products, so economic products. We have three ways of looking at water saving: use less water, waste less water, and reuse more of the water you have. So the use less water, we have a whole range of products, which we're going to talk about later. The waste less water sort of fits in with a bit that Dan's talking about, looking at leaks and things like that. And reuse, we do a lot on grey water and rainwater. Okay, now this is very, very fancy. Basically, it's talking about the water energy nexus. So by saving water, you also save energy. You can save process materials. It's beneficial for your customers. It's beneficial for your end users. There's a whole load of reasons to save water, and quite often the savings are a lot bigger and deeper than you think. And in there is an example of some of the products we work with. So Quensus is there. We've also got Guardio, Conti, Urimat, the waterless urinals you've probably seen. And our idea is to act at the center of that and provide I hate the word holistic, but a holistic view of water savings and water management. And then these are the sorts of people we work with. And with these, it might be in some circumstances we provide them with some waterless urinals, or it might be that we are working in detail with them, working on a water management plan, water strategy, giving them an overarching view, telling them what to focus on. There's a whole range. As I say, it ranges from leak detection to rainwater harvesting, grey water processing, individual water efficient products like toilets and taps, or a general overview of water use. So looking at where your water is coming from, what it's used for, and where it's going. So you can see us as an overall water solution provider, which sounds very fancy. But yeah, anything to do with water, That's us.
Thank you. Right. So let's talk about water management and leak prevention. Dan, I'm going to let you drive from here.
Thanks, Rachel. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to talk to you about having an automatic flow monitoring and shut-off device. So why should you have this? There are two types of leaks. One is it's just going straight down your drain. So you are literally pouring money down the drain without you knowing. And this could range from leaky loos to urinals, incorrect readings, underground pipe leaks, and inefficient use, faulty sprinklers, overflowing tanks. The list is almost endless. And we've seen most of this through using the data that we've got. So there's a few case studies at the end that you might be interested in to showcase the types of savings that we've seen. But overall, this is the kind of averages that we've seen on a typical £100,000 bill. The second type of leak will be the ones that you probably more familiar with, and the ones that we definitely don't want, which is going through ceilings and causing damages and insurance claims. We all have fire alarms and burglar alarms, but who has a water alarm? Not many, and that's because the technology hasn't really been there up until now. But with the sort of increase in AI, learning what's normal, what water consumption looks for your site, and learning around that, now the technology is here to give you massive savings, not only on the water, but also on insurance. Next slide, please. So the general concept is there is something that plumbs into your building. It measures water. It turns the water off in an intelligent way. It connects to the internet, so you get alerts, you get an app. You can share that control with anyone you like, building management normally, or the tenants of a building, so that they're able to override the shut off or provide insight into, the leak investigations. Next slide, please. In more detail, it's essentially like a smart meter, but it's private. So when people talk about smart meters, they generally talk about the utilities meters, which are generally used for billing. So that it's just more accurate billing. If they do say that there's sort of a leak detection facility, then it's usually very difficult for them to tell you where that leak is, even if they do know that you've got a leak. It's usually based on the nighttime rate. But when we install a product, it is for you. It is for the end client, not for the water company. So it's for you to be able to reduce your water consumption without having to go through a water retailer or a water wholesaler. And you're able then to fully self-manage your water consumption, including automatically shutting off the leaks, help with detecting where those leaks are through real-time graphs, and the ability to automatically save water by shutting the water off out of hours, with the ability to override that if anyone comes in out of hours through the app. Next slide, please. The hardware is fairly simple. It is a flow meter, which is a standard water meter, but the ones we use are very high resolution. So the water meters are generally used for billing, have a low resolution, but they're very, very accurate, which is what the water companies want. But for leak detection, you need a slightly different technology that gives you high resolution. It's not as accurate, but it means that you will get notifications within a minute if there is a problem, rather than after a month. The valve is used for shutting the water off. You don't have to have the valve. These are all components. So you might just want to monitor the water supply, in which case you would just have a flow meter. But if you have the valve, then that gives you the ability to automatically and remotely shut the water off. And all this is controlled through our control base, which is something that connects to the internet. And that's really where the power lies. If you go to the next slide, the power lies within the software that drives all the insight, all the graphs, the AI to learn the consumption profile of the different areas of the building, or the whole building if you choose to monitor the whole building as one. And this is called Flow Reporter. It's available on the App Store and Google Play, but also as a web app. So, for example, we have Concierge that uses this on a daily basis to manage the water consumption of hundreds of apartments, and it's all available on one dashboard. And for each apartment, they're able to share that access with the individual tenants as well. Next slide, please. So you might be wondering, a fire alarm works by detecting fire, heat or smoke. And that's quite easy because normally you don't expect a fire in a building. Unlike water, where you do expect water in a building to be constantly used. So it is difficult, and there is a teething period. And at the start, the alerts are based around time and volume. So in one event where you've got water flowing through a tap, from the start to the end, how long is that taking and how much water is that using? We have a two-stage process. So it will alert first, giving you the chance to say, no, this is fine. This is just the irrigation or washing of the vans, before it shuts off at a future time. So at the start, we don't have any data for your building. So this is what we would generally put in. And this gives you a sort of rough indication of what kind of the alerts look like. And it is simple. But over time, there will be a pattern reoccurring, habitual use. And if you go to the next slide, you'll be able to see a sort of day graph of water being used. This is a household, but the same process applies for any area, really. We will put an envelope, or the system will put an envelope around the consumption that it's seen before, and it will then make those alerts specific for the time of day and day of the week that it's seen. So for example, in this, there are a couple of showers in the evening that may have been over 20 minutes, and that's fine. It will then set the alerts for 30 minutes or 40 minutes. But during the times when there's not been any use, they are the most important, because that's where the thresholds will then go right down to, 10 minutes. You can set a minimum, but usually we'd say 10 minutes. And that gives the necessary sort of toilet flushing, even a shower that's less than 10 minutes, so that if anything unusual happens, it still allows a bit of water through. But if the worst thing happens, which is a burst pipe, it will shut it off almost immediately during those out of hours times. As well as the sort of flow monitoring, we do very simple sort of leak detection cables and splash sensors, which are a bit like fire alarms. If water comes into contact with them, they will just shut the water off. So these are for very high risk areas like server rooms or drip trays. And these can all be integrated or self-contained as well. Next slide, please. So how does it get installed? If it's a retrofit, then what we do is we turn the water off, we cut the pipe, and then plumb the flow meter and valve in. The base panel gets connected to Wi-Fi. If the property doesn't have Wi-Fi, or whatever reason, security concerns means that we can't get on the Wi-Fi, then we'll use a SIM card instead and use a 4G network. But any pipe sizes it can be used, from small pipes to large pipes. And hopefully you can see that you can sub-meter as many areas as you want. But to keep it simple, we tend to give three options: a bronze, silver, and gold. You may have also heard about BREEAM. That is kind of something that I would say is more ticking a box. We don't really see these working very well because they're usually put before a booster tank. So all you're doing is seeing a tank filling up. You're not actually seeing the end use. But our bronze standard is one system for the whole building after the booster tank. So you're seeing every little thing that's going on in the building. It's on a larger pipe size, which means that it's more expensive, a bit more difficult to install, and you are obviously going to have a lot more water going through it. So the leak detection learning will be longer because it's got more things to learn around. The gold standard would be to try and go downstream as far as possible. So for an apartment block, we would usually monitor each apartment. And that means you're isolating just that individual apartment if there's a leak. You're not affecting anywhere else in the building. And this is obviously a really good solution going forward, but you're having more systems. So there's a middle ground here where there's silver standard, where you're sub-metering perhaps every floor or every area, such as a washroom or a part of the building that's easily identifiable. Next slide, please. But there's no good having the best system if it's not installed correctly and it's not used correctly. So over the sort of last 8 years while we've been doing this, we've kind of moved out of product development. We still do it as a software, as a service company. You always have to develop on top of what you've got, but we've moved more into the assistance with installing it, the assistance with using the software and user training, diagnostics, servicing, technical submittals, specification of where to put these systems, because we understand that this is quite a niche business and people aren't going to be aware of the water systems inside their building. So the analogy is there's no point having a burglar alarm if it's installed in the roof and nobody knows how to set it. And that's true here as well. And as part of that, we have a commissioning procedures to make sure that if you purchase a system, it is installed in the right place and it is doing exactly what it's supposed to do, with training on site, so that people have a standard operating procedure. If there is a leak, they know exactly what to do. We do a lot of work in the construction industry, and they have sort of best practice for water management plans. This usually focuses around quality assurance and having responsible people to deal with leaks, and the water systems in general. The most important thing is the mitigation side of it and the automatic mitigation, which is where we come in. But we can also help with water management plans so that this is all integrated, so that the software reports to the responsible people, and you have a water management plan during the lifetime of the building, not just for the construction or renovation side of it. In terms of our impact so far, we've got over probably 4,000 devices sold so far now, and most of these are in apartment blocks. But we do quite a lot with airports and water companies, restaurants where they have lots of restaurants nationwide and they want a sort of central reporting system. At schools as well, schools have traditionally been very, very good payback periods. And other brands as well, like Travis Perkins, IBM, and football stadiums. And that's sort of the next slides will be on case studies.
Just on that, Dan, where you mentioned water companies. So is that the water company themselves? Is that working with their customer base?
A bit of both. So we've worked with wholesalers like SES. Jeremy has got it there, and that's been running for years now, over 5 years. And that was, I think, during the sort of transition to water retailers. And the hope was to then promote it through water retailers to end clients. But as you're probably aware, it's quite difficult, that sort of communication to non-household users about the technology. It goes through about a dozen people before it gets to the actual person that it needs to go to. And so it hasn't really taken off through the water retailer side of it, but we still have quite a lot of interest there. It's just about getting that buy-in from both the client, the retailer, and the wholesaler all in one. And this leads nicely onto this slide, actually, which is a typical water savings that we've seen before. So uncontrolled urinals, we see everywhere. Very simple. I mean, you can get a urinal control for less than £100. But the issue we usually see is that urinal controls have been installed. It's just they don't work anymore. So when a person goes in to check, like an auditor, for example, they see that the systemizer's there, but they don't actually know if the batteries are working, if the solenoid valve has stuck, if the sensor works, if it's been programmed correctly. Any number of things could make it not work. And obviously, when you're inside and it's flushing, you think, well, it's working because I'm inside. What happens when you go outside is the real issue. And especially out of hours, it really shouldn't be used at all. It should only flush when there are people using it. So having the system in monitors the efficiency and efficacy of all these fittings that you would normally put in to save water that may actually be broken. And one of the things that is becoming an increasingly debated topic is leaky loos. Now, you may have the old style toilets, which are 12, 13 liters, sort of the lever flush valves. And yeah, okay, they're using a lot of water per flush. But the dual flush toilets we see that use 3 liters and 6 liters, they leak. They have a technology that leaks, and in fact, they use a hell of a lot more water than the traditional toilets. So when we see people try to install these systems, yeah, it's a great idea, but also have a monitoring system in place so that when they leak, straight away you're not wasting £5,000 a year on each toilet. Sometimes that could have easily been fixed. A lot of the time it's from hard water areas, so limescale buildup, so all it requires is a bit of a clean. But sometimes it's just because it's been installed incorrectly, or it's just been used in the wrong way. Buttons have been pushed too far in, that kind of thing. Very easy things to fix, but without a monitoring system, it's almost impossible to figure out, unless you're constantly going around checking toilets all the time, which I doubt you want to do. And then there's other things like hot running taps, obviously. Then you've got energy involved and underground supply leaks, which again are very, very difficult to spot. And really, the water companies should be telling you about these, but they are difficult to spot because it could be happening for years. And if you're just comparing water bills and it looks the same as last month, then there's nothing to worry about, right? But if that's been happening for years and years, that you wouldn't spot it. Thames Water do a find and fix scheme. So they have a team that goes around fixing leaks and giving water efficiency advice and products. They have nearly done 13,000 visits, and they have data that shows that actually installing water flush reducers and tap inserts and shower head reduction accounts for less than 10% of the water saving. It's actually the leaking toilets, urinals, and taps that account for more than 90% of the savings. So my recommendation is, yes, still go for those. But first of all, check your leaks, because that will probably have a much shorter payback period than installing reducing fixtures.
I think, Dan, you're absolutely right. It's a mixture of all of those, isn't it? From an EcoProd viewpoint, it's the reason why we recommend that before you do anything, you do an overall water strategy. Just look at where your water comes from, what it's used for, and where it's going. And you can compare yourself to similar sized businesses. And if your water bill's 10 times the amount, why? The question is to ask why. And the good thing about Quensus is it gives you that sort of information. It gives you, not only is it the cutting off, but it also gives you information on your water use going forward. So yeah, good stuff.
I think, there's a lot of desktop exercises that could be done, and, comparing like for like businesses. I think since COVID, with people working from home, it is a bit more difficult now because things have changed. Water consumption has changed in non-household. So having data that is explicit for your premises, for your use case, for the people that go in at different times of the day and different days of the week is important. And then when you do fix it, having that graph of before and after is vitally important for, showcasing the efforts that you've made to upper management, to say, look how much we've saved, and going forward, if that ever creeps back up because of leaks, it's immediately mitigated rather than waiting for the next desktop exercise or audit. It's a 24/7 audit essentially. So case studies. This is a really good one. It was a football stadium, but it really could have happened anywhere. They had an external leak that had been going on since records began, and the way we found it was essentially our system was plumbed on in the inside, and they were putting in their water meter data every month. And all we did was compare it inside the software, compared inside with outside, and there was a huge gap, as you can see in July and August, comparing the blue and the black. You don't have to be an expert there to see there's a significant amount of waste, and this is done in pounds. So, almost 7 grand a month. And yeah, it cost about 5 grand to find and fix, because it was under a car park. And what was happening was the water was simply going down the drain. So there was a drain nearby. So it was literally pouring money down the drain. That was £82,000 a year. And they also managed to get a rebate from their water company for failing to spot this. So there's a massive opportunity here. If you do have bills that are exceeding 5 grand, it is, there's a good chance you get a very good return on investment here. This is an airport. So they had every single tap toilet in urinal monitored. This was a special use case. They wanted a smart washroom that was able to detect exactly the asset that was needing to be fixed if there was a leak, because the airport is almost like a mini city, and it takes a long time to get from one side to the other. So having that data to know exactly where to go to fix those leaks was important to them, but also knowing where that water was going. So as Jacob was saying, having that kind of water balance, saying exactly where your water's going, then allowed them to say, well, let's focus on the toilets first before we go on to the urinals and taps, because that's where the massive savings could be made. They had flushes that could be programmed, and simply put, they weren't programmed correctly. So they didn't actually have to pay anything apart from someone going around programming these toilets, which took about 5 minutes a toilet, and they saved 26%. So there was nothing actually needed, but they did do further things like water reducing taps, and waterless urinals as well. That then this kind of data showed exactly the return on investment they could make based on the capital that they were outgoing. The schools that we've done, as I said before, have always been ripe for savings. This one in particular had a system installed during Easter holidays where nobody should have been in, yet they were still using almost 4,000 litres a day. That turned out to be a bunch of urinals. So while the commissioning was being done, what we also did was showed them the real time, and we went round and turned branches off. So we were able to see exactly which areas of the building were wasting water on site during the visit of the install. And it turned out to be 3 or 4 urinals, which should have been controlled, but they were broken. So they fixed them, and that was great. They saved, £3,000 a year just by doing that. They wanted to move that system then to another school, and we convinced them, no, let's keep it in, because this is just, you've saved right now, but in a year, 2 years time, it could all change. The batteries could go, the solenoid valve could stick, anything could happen. So they kept it in, but it was only a few months later that more urinals failed, and that was even more. That was £8,000 a year. So it was an important lesson to learn for them, that just fixing it today doesn't mean it's going to be fixed for life. So having a continuous system that automatically alerts is important, because how long this would have gone on for, probably years, and so you're wasting over £10,000 a year by not having an automatic system. Very simple case study here. Office block had one toilet wasting 6,000 litres a day. Obviously, a lot of money going down the drain, but also there's CO2 associated with a water company cleaning and pumping that water to your end device. That is roughly 800 grams per meter cubed. So there is a significant amount of CO2 associated with leaks as well. So it's sustainable by saving water. This was a warehouse. We had a leak that was a fitting under a sink, where they had a special kind of hot water tap system, hadn't been fitted correctly, was loosening over time. Before it burst, the system was able to detect it and tell staff about it. So they were able to save potentially 50 grand's worth of stock from, if it had burst, the damage that it would have caused. The thing that I hadn't put on there was a case study where, or in many of the case studies, a lot of these sites are closed out of hours, so at night time. Even if you don't fix the leak, you can set through the app the valve to switch off automatically every night, every weekend, so that you immediately mitigate those leaks and save up to 40% just by turning the water off out of hours. And if someone does come in out of hours, you can give them access to the app to open and close the valve if they come and go. And we found that extremely successful on construction sites, where there's a very clear first person comes in at around 6 a.m., last person leaves at 6 p.m. So you've already got 12 hours a day of no leaks. So even if you have leaking toilets and leaking taps, it immediately gets shut off, saving that 12 hours a day of constant water consumption. So in summary, stop pouring money down the drain, embrace a smarter, more sustainable way to manage your water, and start saving with automatic shut-off and leak detection. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I'm going to move over to questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I've got a few that have come in and I need to press the buttons. So, okay. You mentioned that the system analysing what is normal and basing its information or responses on that. What about if there is already an undetected leak when the system is installed? Will this be picked up at the install phase, or will the system just assume that it is normal and it was like that already, as it was like that already? I think you did cover this a little bit after the question came in, but
it's a really good question, and the answer lies within how it's used. So on commissioning, one of the things we check is the water consumption going in so far. And we don't know everything about the building, so we do need someone there, who we train, who also knows the kind of footfall through the building, and on the day that we're there, how many people there should be. So we're able then to sort of guess what that water consumption should look like at that time. And if there is a leak, it's usually very easy to find. We use the real-time consumption to see, look, you're using 10 litres per minute. There's only 5 people in the building.
Yeah, what are they doing?
So what we tend to do then is turn branches off, maybe to each floor. And then if it goes to 0, we know that the leak is on that floor. And we just keep doing that until we isolate the exact point or points of the leak. So for example, sometimes you might go to the first leak and you go, there it is, fix it. But actually there's more leaks. You need to know all of the leaks. So for example, urinals, you might have many urinals that are leaking. So that's the key thing, is about how you use the software. If that process hadn't been done, then you're right. It would be it would be learning around that leak, which maybe is what you want to do. Maybe you know that there's a leaking toilets, and you're not that bothered about fixing it. Then it will learn around that, and it will only alert if it goes above what it's seen before.
Okay, thank you.
It sort of comes back to that principle as well about doing a water management plan.
Yeah.
If you do that early on, you know, before installing the Quensus, because you should know vaguely where your water is coming from, how much you're using, where it's going to, and if there are anomalies in that, you know, before you install the Quensus, then you can understand that better.
Yes, yeah. So you'd have like a projected what you think it should be using, and then after a week you would see what actually is being used, and if they line up, then that usually poses a good figure going forward. But if they don't, you then know that there's a problem.
Okay, thank you. Does the system only apply to mains water? What about tank water, hot water, central heating systems?
It can be put on any system, but usually mains water is the most important, or boosted water if you've got a booster set, because of the unlimited source. In closed systems, you don't have that. So we can do it. It's just that there's not as much saving to be made when it's on a closed loop system. What was the other one? Tanks. Yeah. So
tanks, central heating, hot water.
Yeah, so tanks, absolutely. We would always try and put one before and after, but the one after is probably more important. But if you put one before, you're obviously protecting the tank as well in case that is leaking or splits.
Can Quensus system pick up tiny leaks as small as 2 to 3 litres in an hour?
That's all based around the water meter technology. So there are water meters that can go down to that. Our flow sensors only go down to about half a litre per minute, depending on how they're installed. But we do have algorithms that can go down to 0.1 litres per minute. And they've worked really well on things like, the slow leaking toilets. But with slow leaking toilets, it's important to know that if it is slowly going down the pan, what you tend to find is the tank slowly empties and then will top itself up very quickly. So we tend to find on the graphs, actually it picks those up very nicely, and you get these every 5 minutes or so. You get this spike in water consumption as the toilet's filling. So it depends what you're trying to find, but we can go on any water meter. So if you wanted to go down to that, we wouldn't necessarily use these flow sensors. We'd use something like an ultrasonic meter that would go down to those levels.
Okay, thank you. We are very seasonal in use. Summer use is massive on our assets, winter not so bad. Will the system cope as the steep increase looks like it will just cause alarms to be sent? How long a period does it sample for alarms? Hours, weeks, months?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. The learning period is at least a week because it's based on day of the week, so it separates weekdays and weekends. But it probably it gets better over time. So it depends on the amount of space that you're monitoring. The larger the space, the longer it takes to learn. But between 1 and 12 weeks, I would say is the average learning capability. Around seasonal changes, what we have is something called holiday alarms. So if you do know that there are going to be particularly hot days, I don't know, the swimming pool's going to get filled up, what we would do is set a sort of table of entries to say, ignore alerts on this day, or set the alerts to very high. And that usually gets around those, and those can be all set beforehand.
There's a sort of link to that, and I think you might have answered this too, but we have a large event space. We could go from an occupancy of 6 staff one day to 1,500 people the next. Can we give the system our events diary so it knows what to expect in advance rather than learning from previous data? So
yeah, that's pretty much it. It's about how the software is used, because there's always going to be edge cases and spikes in consumption, and you obviously want to keep the water going through the spikes. And one thing that we tend to see on construction sites is they don't use any water, maybe like 10 or 20 liters in an apartment until they flush. They do a whole flushing procedure, and that uses hundreds of liters then. So all we do is tell them either try and remember to build that table up so that so the system knows that you're going to flush on that. They tend to not do that, and it just tends to be on the day that they remember. And that's why the two-stage process. So as long as that person gets the alert and overrides the alert, they're able to use as much water as they like. It's just about how a standing operating procedure for knowing what to do when you get that alert. So it won't shut off like straight away. It will give you the chance as long as you're quick enough. So either pre-plan and don't worry about it, or be quick enough with the alerts coming in.
Okay, thank you. What's the in-use life of the valves, etc.? Do they require any kind of PPM once in, or software updates, etc.?
The software is all over the air updated, so we are developing on it all the time. And yeah, you will always get the latest. That's both on the hardware side and on the software app side. In terms of servicing, the valves don't need any servicing. We use motorized valves. We've moved away from solenoid valves. You could probably see I've not got a good experience with solenoid valves, especially in urinals. They tend to stick, and motorized valves are very good at giving you a feedback, so you know if they're open or closed, and they are essentially just a quarter turn valve, so it's very easy to see if they're working. The meters themselves usually have a lifetime, so the lifetime is based around the consumption going through them. So it's hard to give you a time, but generally we would say between 5 and 10 years.
Okay, thank you. In particularly hard water areas, is there any risk of the valves being clogged up with limescale? We've had issues in the past having to replace valves, etc., because of this.
Yeah, I think that goes back to solenoid valves. You have a rubber flange on them that tends to get built up over time with limescale. You can do an exercise procedure to sort of shake it off, but it doesn't always work in very hard water areas. We use motorized valves. They don't have the same problem.
Okay, thank you. Do you link to Wi-Fi and SIM card as standard in case Wi-Fi goes down due to power cuts? And if no roaming SIM available, do you recommend UPS backup on Wi-Fi?
Yeah, so we can do all of that. We have done building-wide Wi-Fi before that is battery backed up. Our systems have a battery backup as well. So if there is a SIM card and that has a battery backup, then yeah, everything's on a battery backup on power cuts. The battery backup usually lasts at least 24 hours, depending on how many valve actuations there are. So yeah, the simple answer is yes.
Okay, thank you. If a building has an existing leak system, but without the water isolation provision, can the two systems be integrated onto your platform to force a closure of the water system?
It depends on what the water system is. We can go on any meter and valve. So if they've got water meters in place with a pulse output, we can attach to them. The issue will be plumbing a valve in next to the meter. So if you're doing that, then I would probably go for replacing those meters anyway to sort of better quality meters, because usually what we find are the meters that have been put in place are low resolution, which makes leak finding a lot harder. They're good for billing, but for leak detection, not as good. So if you're going to be doing the plumbing, you may want to replace the meters anyway. But the simple answer is yes. I would recommend using the meters and seeing what data you get from them. And then when it comes to plumbing the valves in, you know whether you want to upgrade or not.
Okay, thank you. All right, I've done everything on the Q&A. I just need to go to my direct messages. Bear with me a sec. Okay, do insurance companies offer a discount for these installations?
They have been known to fund some of the installations that we've done. So we are Aviva specialist partners for escape of water prevention, and I can highly recommend them. They do a lot with construction companies, but also with buildings that have had a history of leaks. So we tend to work with them to consult and specify devices. There's no simple answer because there's no standard. It's all dependent on around your claims history. But if you are not claiming over time, your premiums are going to go down anyway. But we tend to find that deductibles are decreased. If there has been a historic leak problem, you might have increased deductibles or excess. Then, or maybe even you're uninsurable. Then this system will definitely help with that.
Mm. Is there any grant funding available for these installations? That might be you, Jacob.
That's a very good question. So water utilities, so the wholesalers, have non-household reduction targets. And they're looking at all options around this at the moment. So there aren't any formal grants, but it's something that we're currently discussing with them. And it's something that I think if a business were to approach Quensus and then go to a water wholesaler directly, then yes, I think there would be. What we need is more and more evidence, and obviously Dan's got that now. He's gathering more and more evidence around this. The links with insurance companies are good. We've got some case studies. It's quite difficult because you can't quantify how much leaks because you don't know when you're going to have a leak. But I mean, I think the things that Thames have found, particularly around leaky loos and stuff like that, shows that this is a major way of tackling water loss. So not at the moment and not directly, but yes, and please ask, and it probably could be.
Do you think
Sorry,
there's
bad answer there.
complications with the retailer as well? So if the the client wants to have one, then we would first go to the retailer and the wholesaler to see if there's a conversation around funding.
Okay. I think that I don't think I've got anything else on my Q&A or on my chat. No, I don't. Right. Thank you very much.
I'll ask one then. If no one else is
okay.
asking. So around.
Go.
Sorry, I was going to say. I was just going to say I'll ask one around installation. So, can it be done by FM managers themselves? Do you do it? Who can do the installation? What level of qualification is needed? Could you just supply the kit and they do it themselves, or how is it done?
We can install it, but we tend to find it's better if the FM installs it. They know their system, their water systems and their buildings better. Then we'd have to worry about access issues or inductions or anything like that. So we tend to supply the equipment and recommend us do the commissioning. However, we can also train the FM to do the commissioning. So if you've got a large amount of installs, that would be a much cheaper way, is if they know how to install and commission it, they can get on and do it. The installation can get quite costly if we start doing it and there's a lot of systems. So having the FM do it is definitely a better way. There's unlike electricians, plumbing, you don't really need to have qualifications, which I find amazing. But it's fairly simple. It is just installing any valve or meter, so any plumber should be able to do it. The only slightly complicated part is the app, which if anyone has installed their own smart home device like Alexa or a smart plug or something, it's as easy as that. But I say that with tongue in my cheek because it's sometimes can be a bit difficult. But yeah, it's essentially connecting it to Wi-Fi and using the app, which some plumbers they can jump right into, but some plumbers don't. So that's why we always recommend us do the commissioning. If they've plumbed it in, we can come in and set everything up, but we can also train the plumbers on how to do it as well.
Somebody's just asked about costs.
Of course, I was waiting for that one.
Mm.
The costs, there isn't a simple answer because it depends on the pipe size. So we can go up all the way up to 8-inch pipe size, which is a phenomenal size, really. So if you've got a large building and you've got an 8-inch pipe, we would try to recommend to go downstream and do it a bit smaller pipes, but we can go up to that pipe size, or we can go all the way down to 3/4 inch, 15 mil copper. And so the price range is between £500 and £5,000, depending on the size of the pipe.
Okay, thank you. Have you got any more questions, Jacob?
Nope.
Okay.
Sorry.
Brilliant. I don't think I've got any more that have come in either. So thank you very much, everybody, for attending. As I said at the beginning, we will get this whole thing kind of wrapped up and processed and loaded up onto our website, and we'll get an email out to you as soon as we can. It gives you a link to watch the recording, including all of this Q&A, and to download the slides and so on. If you would like to see Quensus in action or get a demonstration of the software, those are all things that we can do for you. We'd be delighted to do that. Get in touch with us directly and we can organize a time to do that remotely, or people can visit and see installations, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, I think the showroom has an installation there.
Yeah.
We can unplumb it, then replumb it in to show how easy it is to install, or yeah, just show how it's used with the software.
Yeah, so please, if those are the sort of next steps that you're interested in, please get in touch. Thank you, Jacob, for helping me out there with questions and what have you, and Dan for your excellent presentation. We hope to see all of you on another event sometime soon.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone. Thank you.